G'day guys, ZiggyD here. It's been quite a while since Borderlands the pre-sequel died off and still no news on Borderlands 3. Like many of you guys, I've been hanging for another quality loot and shoot experience. Well, it looks like Shadow Warrior 2 is serving us just that, an entree of blood and gore, a main course of sexy loot, and a nice helping of Wang for dessert. Shadow Warrior 2 came as a bit of a surprise. The last game looked good, but it wasn't a loot-based game at all, so I didn't really check it out. So when 2 came along sporting a sexy new loot system, I was pretty interested. If you guys want the short of it before I go into more detail, I've played about 15 hours of Shadow Warrior 2 so far, and it compares very closely to Borderlands in a very good way. Only bloodier and with more dick jokes. And to top it off, it does melee combat way better than Borderlands ever did. So let's get into more detail now, starting off with the combat and movement. This game plays fast, frantic, and quite often you ride the edge of your seat for minutes at a time. This game sports a pretty nice movement system. It's no Warframe, but you can double jump, dash, ninja drop, and scoot around enemies at a rapid pace. You'll smoothly weave in and out of chunky melee combat and over-the-top gunplay, quite often using everything at your disposal to take out tough enemies. I'm playing on the second hardest difficulty, and it offers a decent challenge even for an experienced Borderlands and action RPG player. Combat ranges from fast and furious encounters where you'll professionally dispatch enemies feeling like a badass ninja, and then longer absolutely insane fights where you'll do just about everything you can to stay alive. The gunplay is decent, quite comparable to Borderlands. Some weapons feel amazing, like the shotguns which blast chunks out of enemies and knock them over, and some weapons on the other hand feel a little floaty and unimpactful, like some of the energy-based SMGs and things like that, which, again, kind of reminds me of Borderlands. Bit of a mixed bag. I do have to take a moment, however, to praise the melee combat. Melee in many loot-based FPS games is pretty lacking. Hell, I think in most FPS games it's pretty bad. Here, however, it's chunky, fast, and feels damn sexy to play. The game features a pretty incredible system where you can slice limbs and chunks off enemies, even so far as slicing off a weapon-holding arm. It gets a little bit hard to see through the gore at times. It can be a little bit hectic and hard to tell what's going on, but with a bit of practice you'll dash in and out of melee range with power attacks and light slices with precision. It's so good that I can see people wanting to play the entire game in melee. However, that would be a disservice to the game because it really shines when you mix ranged and melee combat. A small but important detail is that when you pull out a melee weapon in combat, you'll perform a draw slash, so you never feel penalized for swapping to melee if you're in melee range, because when you do so, you actually perform an attack. Really cool. So the combat overall is pretty top notch. But what are we all here for on this channel, of course? The loot. How is the loot system? Well, it takes a few hours to get going. The first couple hours of the game, there's not much in the way of a loot system, really. You get a couple weapons and you get a couple upgrades, nothing too major. However, once it does get going, you'll find a system full of customization potential. So here's the lowdown. The loot system is a bit different from what you might expect. Unlike Borderlands, you won't find thousands of different weapons in this game. Weapons drop only occasionally from enemies and are quite rare overall. You'll get a steady-ish stream of them from quests, and you'll get some from the vendors in town, but it's looking like this game is more in the dozens of weapons rather than the thousands of weapons. Now before you hear that and call it a day, because we all like finding lots of cool loot, the thing is that this game features a really interesting weapon upgrade system. Enemies frequently drop upgrades that you can socket into your gear. These do a wide range of things from adding elemental effects, scaling criticals, adding leech effects, and even changing the functionality of your weapons. Using the upgrades you can significantly change your playstyle. For example, I've added an upgrade to this heavy machine gun here to allow me to drop it as a turret that'll automatically attack enemies. I've also added a piercing effect to the bullets it fires to help with crowd control. As a bit of a side note for PoE fans, it kind of reminds me a little bit of Path of Exile. I basically used ranged attack totem and the pierce support gem on this gun. Other examples of functionality changing upgrades that I've found allowing you to charge up shots for more damage in AoE, one that makes grenades stick or makes them remotely detonatable, explosive rounds, firing multiple barrels, splitting shots, and many, many more. I've easily spent a couple hours playing around with different upgrades to find optimal setups and test new playstyles. So this is pretty interesting, right? You find a lot less weapons in Shadow Warrior 2 than in, say, Borderlands, but you get to customize those weapons much more deeply with a constant stream of upgrades. And you can even craft and change upgrades later in the game using the Forge. And I actually quite like this. One complaint I've always had about the Borderlands games is that it has a real loot fatigue problem. Just way too many guns that are just slight variations of each other or slight numerical upgrades. It can get kind of tiring at times to sort through them all and to constantly be changing them out. Here in Shadow Warrior 2, however, your weapons are a canvas for you to paint playstyles onto, and every new weapon you do get is super exciting because now you have something new to try a bunch of your existing upgrades onto. So both the combat gameplay and loot are pretty damn good. That's the majority of what I need to enjoy a good loot and shoot. I'm sure many of you guys are the same. However, I'll briefly touch on some of the other aspects of the game that are worth mentioning. The music is kick-ass. You've been hearing it in this review. It's pretty damn good. Graphically, the game is a mixed bag. Character models are, I would say, lacking. Enemy models, however, are awesome and terrifying at times. I love the designs on them. Environments, on the other hand, are freaking awesome. It's easy to miss how good some of them actually are because most of the time you're too busy carving up enemies and there's blood flying everywhere and everything. But it's well worth stopping to take a look at the scenery sometimes. Like there's this part, I remember looking up this gigantic statue and the skybox is this kind of like twisting mountains and things like that. It looks awesome. The storyline is whatever, just an excuse to go around and slice things up mostly. I guess it's kind of unique, but somewhat forgettable. However, the dialogue and humour in this game is pretty special, I'll say, and worth listening to, even if you don't care about the story itself. I couldn't really tell you much about the story in this game, spirits and demons and stuff, I don't know, but the actual dialogue has been pretty entertaining. Now, here's a disclaimer though, this game's dialogue treads a line. For some of you guys it'll be cringy, but for others it's going to be a crack-up.
Intimidation is the tool of the fearful heart.
Hey, it beats being the fool of the tearful thought.
That's deeply stupid.
But it's true.
Fair enough.
Get out of here!
If you enjoy a good self-aware B-movie that doesn't take itself too seriously, then you'll probably like this. I found it quite funny, and my livestream viewers have been pretty split. Some love it and some hate it. The MC's name, for example, is Wang, and the dick jokes flow freely. That should tell you pretty much all you need to know. So overall, at $40 on Steam, this game is a pretty safe buy for anyone who's hanging for another Borderlands-like experience. The only thing I cannot speak to yet is endgame and longevity. The game has New Game Plus, co-op, and randomized zones to farm, but I cannot say much more yet beyond that. But I will report back in later after I've played some more. At this point though, even if it doesn't have much staying power, this game is well worth a play at its price tag. I give it a 9 dismemberings out of 10. That's it for now, I'm ZiggyD, and thanks for watching.